The word sliced through the stunned silence of the arena, sharp and cold as shattered glass. "If you can ride this horse, I'll marry you." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the investors on the observation deck, quickly swallowed by the vast space. No one was sure if they should laugh. On the sand-dusted floor below, Mei-Ling Zhao stood with her arms crossed, her posture as unyielding as the steel beams supporting her equestrian empire. Her voice, amplified by the arena's acoustics, dripped with venom cloaked in silk. It was a cruel jest, a public dismantling of a man's pride meant to end an embarrassing spectacle. The spectacle was a stallion named Shadow, a beast of sleek black muscle and raw fury, rearing on his hind legs, hooves slashing the air inches from the head of the world's priciest horse trainer. The trainer scrambled backward, pale with fear. Shadow was Mei-Ling's $10 million failure, a genetically flawless champion, dangerously untamable. And he had just proven it again before her most important clients. The man her challenge targeted didn't flinch. A few yards away, Jian Wei held a discarded push broom, a stable hand who cleaned stalls and faded into the background. He had dared to step forward, uttering a single quiet word that, for a fleeting moment, stilled the raging stallion. That flicker of control from a man in worn overalls had pushed Mei-Ling past her limit. It mocked her system, her technology, and the millions spent on experts now cowering in the dirt. "Well?" Mei-Ling pressed, her lips curling into a smirk. "Think you have some magic touch? The world's watching." Jian didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Shadow, seeing not a monster but a terrified creature screaming in its own language. He noted the twitch of the horse's ears, the fear in its white-rimmed eyes, the trembling in its powerful flanks. Dropping the broom, its soft thud on the sand was the only sound. He took a step toward the stallion. The professional trainer, now on his feet, shouted, "Get back. He'll kill you." Jian ignored him, keeping his body relaxed, shoulders low, making himself less threatening. He didn't offer a hand to be bitten. He simply stood, breathing steadily, a calm island in a sea of panic. Shadow snorted, nostrils flaring, taking a stomping step forward in challenge. Jian didn't retreat. He tilted his head, curious, not aggressive. From the observation deck, Mei-Ling's smirk faded into a frown of disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. The janitor was meant to shrink back, apologize, be humbled by her mockery, not hold the attention of a beast that had an Olympic medalist fleeing for his life. "Papa!" A small voice came from the public stands. A little girl, Lina Wei, clutched the railing with wide, worried eyes. Jian's gaze flicked to her, offering a subtle nod. "It's okay." Then he returned to the arena center, finally meeting Mei-Ling's eyes across the sand. He looked tired, not angry or intimidated. His voice, when it came, was steady. "I accept." The investors' chuckles died. Even Shadow seemed to pause, ears swiveling toward Jian's voice. Mei-Ling's mask of arrogance cracked. She blinked, expecting groveling, not agreement. She'd thrown a sarcastic grenade, he'd caught it, pulled the pin, and handed it back. "Fine," she snapped, recovering. 1 month. At the Autumn Cup, you'll ride him in the opening exhibition before everyone. Her words were a threat, a reminder of the humiliation awaiting him. Jian nodded. 1 month. Then, to gasps from the crowd, he turned his back on Shadow and walked calmly to the gate, as if leaving a sleeping cat, not a raging beast. Shadow, inexplicably, didn't charge. He stood, watching the quiet man walk away. Jian went straight to Lina, scooping her into his arms, and left through the exit tunnel without another word. Silence lingered, broken only by the stunned murmurs of investors, a shaken trainer, a confused horse, and a rattled CEO standing in her meticulously controlled world, now in disarray. The lead trainer, Hiroshi Tanaka, approached Mei-Ling, his face pale. "Ms. Zhao, you can't be serious. He's a janitor. The horse will destroy him." Mei-Ling didn't answer, staring at the spot where Jian had stood. His quiet dignity stung more than any insult. He hadn't played her game, he'd rewritten the rules. "Find out who he is," she ordered her assistant, Chen Lu, her voice low. "Everything, where he's from, who he's worked for, what makes him think he can tame that devil." "Yes, Ms. Zhao," Chen replied nervously. "And get that horse back in his stall," she added, turning away. "Double the security on his enclosure. If our janitor wants to play hero, it's on my terms." As she strode off, the weight of her reckless proclamation settled on her. Mei-Ling Zhao, industry titan, had just publicly tied herself to a stable hand before the people she needed to impress. A bitter taste filled her mouth. "He'll fail," she told herself. "He'll beg to be released in a week, and I'll fire him." But as she entered the elevator, a cold flicker of doubt crept in. The image of Jian Wei's calm, steady eyes lingered in Mei-Ling Zhao's mind, as did the way Shadow, the most volatile horse she'd ever seen, had inexplicably stilled. She had meant to humiliate him, to make him a cautionary tale. but as the elevator doors slid shut, a chilling realization hit her. In front of everyone, he had somehow turned the tables, making a mockery of her authority. The next morning, the air at Zhao Equestrian Dynamics buzzed with whispers. Stable hands murmured while brushing prize mares. Executives sipped coffee behind frosted glass, speculating. The tale of the CEO's bizarre wager with a janitor had taken root, a stubborn weed in Mei Ling's pristine empire. In her penthouse office, a sleek space of black lacquer and steel overlooking the facility, Mei Ling hadn't slept. On a massive screen typically showing market data, she looped the arena's security footage. Silently, she studied the scene, Shadow's explosive terror, the trainers cowering, and Jian Wei's unshakable calm. She zoomed in on his face, no arrogance, just a profound stillness. She watched him turn his back on the stallion, dismissing a $10 million beast as if it were nothing. Who is this man? Her assistant, Chen Lu, entered, clutching a tablet like a shield. Ms. Zhao, the preliminary background check on Jian Wei is complete. And, she asked, eyes fixed on the screen. There's almost nothing, Chen said hesitantly. He's been here 2 years. Before that, a janitorial job at a warehouse in the next province. Before that, nothing. No records for a Jian Wei with his ID for a decade. It's like he didn't exist. Mei Ling turned, taking the tablet. She scrolled through the sparse file, no equestrian experience, no licenses, no criminal record. Just a man and his daughter, Lina, enrolled in a local school. A ghost who could calm a beast no one else could touch. Intrigue, rare for her, prickled her skin. Miles away, in a modest apartment smelling of cedar and fresh laundry, Jian sat at a small table, stitching a tear in Lina's canvas backpack. Across from him, Lina drew in her sketchbook, her brow furrowed. Her pages brimmed with horses, not the furious Shadow, but gentle ones galloping through meadows. No trace of the man who'd accepted an impossible challenge, only a father, his movements deliberate as he mended her bag. He hadn't wanted this. Attention was dangerous, risking questions that could unearth a past he'd buried. He'd taken this job for its quiet, to be near horses without reviving who he once was, a penance for a life left behind. Papa, Lina whispered, her first word since the arena. She rarely spoke to anyone else. She slid her sketchbook across. Among the gentle horses, she'd drawn a tall black stallion, calm, with a stick figure, him, standing beside it. Jian's throat tightened. He'd accepted the challenge for Shadow's sake, to end its suffering. But her drawing showed him he'd also done it for her, to prove that not all powerful things were to be feared, that the monsters in her memories didn't define her future. An hour later, a black car with the Zhao logo arrived. Jian was summoned to Mei Ling's office. Inside, the senior team waited. Hiroshi Tanaka, the trainer, glared with hostility. Chen avoided his gaze. Mei Ling sat behind a vast obsidian desk, a queen on her throne. She slid a leather-bound document across. Our contract, she said, voice flat. My lawyers drafted it this morning. It was a power play, another attempt to box him in as a lowly employee. Jian picked it up, flipping through pages of legal jargon, media rights, non-disclosure agreements, liability waivers. In front of the team, he took a pen from Chen's trembling hand and began editing. He struck through the media appearance section and the clause allowing Zhao Equestrian to analyze his methods. At the bottom, he wrote in neat characters, all sessions with Shadow are to be conducted in private. No observers, no censors, no interference. He slid it back. These are my terms. Hiroshi scoffed. Ridiculous. How can we monitor progress without observation? His methods could be dangerous. My methods, Jian said, meeting Hiroshi's eyes, are not your concern. Mei Ling stared at his added sentence, a direct challenge to her data-driven empire. Her instinct screamed to refuse, to fire him. But the memory of him in the arena, the ghost with no past, held her back. Fine, she said, the word bitter. You have your privacy. Your first session is this afternoon. Don't be late. She gestured for him to leave. Later, in her office, Mei Ling sat alone, her promise of privacy already broken. On her screen, a hidden high-definition camera in the rafters of Shadow's reinforced enclosure streamed a live feed. Mei Ling Zhao's one loophole, she would not be denied her data. The paddock door slid open, and Jian Wei stepped inside, wearing his usual worn work clothes. Shadow, at the far end, tensed, ears pinning back as he snorted furiously, pawing the ground. Jian closed the gate and stood still, 50 feet away. No approach, no outstretched hand, no whip, rope, or treats. He leaned against the fence and waited. For an hour, nothing happened. Shadow paced, snorted, and made mock charges, halting to test if Jian would flinch. Jian remained a quiet, immovable presence. He wasn't training, wasn't doing anything. In her office, Mei Ling leaned closer to the screen, her brow creased with confusion and fury. What is he doing? This was a waste, an insult. His grand method was to do nothing? She watched the minutes crawl, the silent tension between a raging horse and a motionless man unfolding like a strange ballet. Frustration surged, yet she couldn't look away. For 3 more days, the ritual persisted. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, Jian entered the paddock and did nothing. He leaned against the fence, arms relaxed, gaze soft. He became part of the scenery, as unremarkable as the water trough. Shadow, meanwhile, unleashed terror, charging the fence, churning sand, rearing with deafening screams of rage that echoed through the stables. He was a storm of black fury, Jian, the still eye at its center. The facility buzzed with gossip. Trainers and stable hands mocked Jian's janitor's meditation or the great stare-down. Hiroshi Tanaka, the head trainer, was livid, confronting Mei Ling twice daily. He's a fraud, Hiroshi fumed before her desk. He's mocking our program. The Autumn Cup is less than 4 weeks away. At this rate, he'll ride that horse to his own funeral. Mei Ling's patience, already frayed, snapped. She'd watched every minute of Jian's sessions on her hidden camera, her frustration growing with each hour of inaction. She thrived on action, results, data. This passive resistance was incomprehensible, infuriating. She found Jian after his session, not in the paddock but in the tack room, cleaning leather bridles with quiet precision. The air smelled of saddle soap and worn leather. He was a janitor again, a background figure, the contrast to his arena confidence jarring. "What's your game, Wei?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the quiet. He looked up, blinking as if surprised to see her in this humble corner of her empire. "I don't play games, Ms. Xiao." "Don't you?" She stepped closer, heels clicking on concrete. "You stand in that paddock doing nothing. Do you think you can tame Shadow by boring him to death?" Jian set down the bridle, wiping his hands on a cloth. His gaze, direct and fearless, made her want to step back. "Shadow isn't bored. He's learning." "Learning what?" she snapped. "To stand still?" "He's learning my presence isn't pressure," Jian said, patient as if explaining to a child. Everyone who's entered his space wanted something, carrying ropes, whips, syringes, ambitions. He's responded with violence. He's been screaming his whole life, and no one's listened. Mei Ling stared, stunned. "He's a horse, not a philosopher. He needs to be broken, taught to obey." "You break a thing meant to be shattered," Jian said, a cold edge in his eyes. "You can't force trust, Ms. Xiao. It has to be offered. I'm creating a space where he can consider it." His words struck at the core of her philosophy: control, dominance, willpower, the pillars of her empire. He called them worthless. "So your strategy is to wait?" she asked, disbelief lacing her voice. "You have less than 4 weeks to ride an unrideable horse, and you're waiting for trust?" "It's the only plan with a chance," he replied. She gave a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You're a fool." She turned, her heels a sharp retreat. Jian watched her go, then resumed his work, hands steady but mind elsewhere. He thought of another rider, another horse. He thought of his wife, Xiulan. The memory came sharp, rodeo crowds roaring, dust and sweat, Xiulan laughing atop a fiery bronco. She was fearless, her fire matching the horse's. He'd been the quiet one, working with whispers and patience. They were 2 halves of a whole. But the world of competitive riding, Mei Ling's world, demanded more risk, more fire. One day, a horse stumbled, a buckle snapped, and her light went out. Grief, an old weight, settled in his chest. That world of ambition had taken everything. World of ambition had shattered Jian Wei's life and silenced his daughter, Lina. He had come to Zhao equestrian dynamics to escape, to live in quiet obscurity. Now Mei Ling Zhao, with her piercing gaze and impossible demands, was pulling him back into that world. He wasn't just taming a horse, he was battling the ghosts of a past that had destroyed him. On the 5th afternoon, Jian entered the paddock, closing the gate and leaning against the fence as always. Shadow began his ritual, snorting, pawing, charging the air, rage boiling over. But today, after 20 minutes of fury, something shifted. Shadow stopped at the far end, sweat slicked, chest heaving. His manic energy ebbed, and he looked at Jian, not with a challenge, but with curiosity. His ears, once pinned back, flicked forward. "Who are you? What do you want?" they seemed to ask. In her office, Mei Ling leaned toward the hidden camera feed, her eyes locked on the screen. She saw the subtle change, Shadow's softened posture, the flicker in his eyes. For 4 days, she'd watched a storm. Now, a crack appeared in the clouds. It was a small detail, but in the silent war between the janitor and the beast, it felt like the first shot fired, and not by the horse. A week passed, each day mirroring the last. Jian entered, stood quietly, and waited. Shadow's changes grew clearer. The furious charges stopped. The screams shortened, replaced by long, intense observation. The horse was a puzzle, cautiously exploring the strange piece Jian brought. On the 8th day, Jian changed his approach. Instead of leaning against the fence, he walked to the paddock center and sat cross-legged in the sand. No longer a tall figure, he was small, grounded. Shadow watched, head high, ears like satellites processing this shift. He took a few steps forward, paused, then took more, not out of aggression, but curiosity. The distance between them began to shrink. That evening, Lina joined her father at the stables. She stayed clear of the paddock, the memory of thundering hooves too raw, but stood in the brightly lit barn aisle, clutching Jian's hand as he prepared Shadow's feed. In his reinforced stall, Shadow made a low, almost soft nicker when he saw Jian, a sound no one else had heard. Lina's grip tightened. She looked at the towering stallion, fear a cold weight in her stomach, now mixed with wonder. While Jian tended the water trough, she pulled a small, lumpy carrot from her pocket. Her hand shook as she placed it on the stall's feed bin, a quiet offering, before retreating to her father's side. Jian saw, placed a hand on her head, and said nothing, but hope swelled in his chest, a feeling dormant for years. In her penthouse, Mei Ling was obsessed. She'd cancelled 3 meetings to watch the drama unfold on her monitor. She saw Shadow's tentative steps, the quiet bond between father and daughter, the carrot. These human moments baffled her logical mind. Jian wasn't just training a horse, he was weaving a quiet miracle beyond her control. Frustrated by the sparse background check, she hired a private investigator, a specialist in unearthing ghosts. "I don't care what it costs," she told him. "Find Jianwei's past." Corporate pressure mounted. Hiroshi Tanaka, a senior board member and traditionalist, requested a private meeting. In her sleek office, he sat stiffly in a black leather chair. "Mei Ling," he began, condescending, "the board is concerned. Your wager with a stable hand is the talk of the circuit. It makes us look frivolous." "My wager," Mei Ling replied evenly, "is a calculated risk, exploring a new training paradigm that could revolutionize the industry." It was a corporate spin, but saying it felt almost true. Hiroshi raised an eyebrow. "An obsession? You've sunk millions into that stallion with no return. Now you're betting our reputation on a janitor. People say you've lost your edge." "Tell them I'm innovating," she said. "The Autumn Cup will show results, not experiments." His warning lingered after he left. Pressure closed in, from the board, her own logic, the ticking clock. Everything hinged on the quiet man in the paddock. 2 weeks after the challenge, the moment arrived. Jian sat in the paddock center for nearly an hour. Shadow, pretending to ignore him, watched closely. Jian rose slowly, brushing sand from his pants, and walked a wide, respectful circle around the paddock, not looking at the horse. He stopped, extending a relaxed, palm-down hand, an invitation, not a demand. For a full minute, nothing happened, only the wind whistling through the rafters. Mei Ling, in her office, held her breath. Then Shadow stepped forward, his movements slow, almost reverent. He closed the distance, stopping inches from Jian's hand, a statue of black marble and coiled power. Shadow could crush Jianwei with a single strike. His nostrils flared, sniffing Jian's outstretched hand, hesitating as a lifetime of fear clashed with this strange new piece. Then, with a gentleness unthinkable for such a beast, Shadow extended his neck, his velvety nose brushing Jian's palm. The touch lasted a second, but it was seismic, a barrier shattered, a silent treaty signed. In her office, Mei Ling Zhao jolted, hand flying to her mouth. Her $10 million monster, a symbol of chaos, had chosen connection, not through force or technology, but through Jian's quiet patience, a power she now realized dwarfed her own. She replayed the footage endlessly, zooming in on Shadow's softening eyes, his relaxed ears, Jian's stillness. Her empire thrived on control, on predictable outcomes, but this act of grace broke every algorithm. A strange ache bloomed in her chest, the sting of being profoundly wrong. The next morning, a leather-bound file arrived from the private investigator, thick as a historical tome. Mei Ling dismissed Chen Lu and locked her office door. The ghost of Jianwei took shape within its pages, clippings from rural Chinese newspapers and obscure equestrian forums, grainy photos of a younger, smiling Jian alongside a vibrant woman with midnight hair, Xiulan, his wife. The articles chronicled the Wei, a generations-old family practice of horsemanship blending art and instinct, bordering on the mystical. Jian, the last and most gifted, was a prodigy who tamed broken spirits. He and Xiulan were a celebrated duo, poised to revolutionize the equestrian world. Then, tragedy, a headline from 6 years ago, riding star Xiulan Wei killed in freak accident at national championships. A snapped rein, a fallen horse, a life snuffed out in dust. After that, Jian and his daughter, Lina, vanished. The Wei died with Xiulan. Mei Ling leaned back, the file heavy in her lap. The janitor she'd mocked wasn't a ghost but an exile, a master hiding in plain sight, cleaning stalls in the world he was born to lead. Her sarcastic marriage proposal, meant to humiliate, now felt like a desecration. Jian didn't appear for his afternoon session with Shadow, his absence sparking alarm in Mei Ling. But she understood, he wasn't her pawn. That evening, after sunset, with the stables quiet, she found him in the darkened indoor arena where she'd issued her challenge. Jian sat on a bale of hay, moonlight casting shadows across the sand. Lina slept beside him on a horse blanket, her sketchbook clutched tightly. Mei Ling approached, her step soft. He didn't seem surprised. He needed a day, Jian said quietly, eyes on the shadows. So did I. She stopped a few feet away, the weight of the investigator's file heavy despite its absence. I know who you are, she said, the words inadequate. He turned, his weary eyes meeting hers in the dim light. The Wei, she continued softly. I read about your family, your wife. I'm sorry. For what? He asked, a quiet challenge. For what happened? Or what you found? For my ignorance, Mei Ling admitted, the honesty surprising her. I saw a janitor. Not the man. He gave a tired shrug. That was the point. No one was supposed to. They sat in fragile silence, broken only by Shadow's soft nicker in the distance. Why here? Mei Ling asked, curiosity overriding pride. Of all places to hide, why the heart of the world you fled? Why work for a company that embodies everything you must despise? Jian looked at Lina, her small chest rising and falling. After Xiulan died, the silence was the hardest. Lina stopped talking. Horses were all I had left of that world, of my family, of her. I didn't want to train or compete, just be near them. They're honest. They don't care about your name or wealth, only what's in your heart. He gestured at the sprawling facility. So I came to the loudest place I could find and took the quietest job. Mei Ling felt her steel trap logic rust under the simplicity of his words. Jian wasn't just taming Shadow, he was rewriting her understanding of strength, forcing her to confront the limits of her control-obsessed world. Mei Ling Zhao had spent years building walls, amassing power, controlling every variable to shield herself from the world's chaos. Jian Wei had protected himself with humility, a quality she couldn't grasp. She noticed Lina's sketchbook, open on the blanket in the moonlight. It showed Shadow running free in a field, mane and tail flowing, with a small, fearless girl, Lina, smiling on his back. In the quiet arena, an unspoken understanding passed between them. The challenge, the contract, the sarcastic bet felt like relics of a foolish game. The true stakes were clear, this was about a man saving his daughter and a woman realizing she might need saving too. The next morning, a memo shocked Zhao equestrian dynamics. Crisp and absolute, it declared Jian Wei promoted to special training consultant with unrestricted facility access and final authority over Shadow. No one could interact with the horse without his consent. Hiroshi Tanaka hurled his tablet in disgust. Senior board member Kenji Sato saw it as a declaration of war. Mei Ling hadn't just tolerated the janitor, she'd elevated him. The change meant nothing to Jian, but the freedom it granted was everything. With the barrier between him and Mei Ling gone, his work with Shadow surged forward. The progress was breathtaking. The single touch became a daily ritual. Jian soon groomed Shadow, brushes gliding over powerful flanks. The stallion, once prone to biting and kicking, stood calmly, head lowered, a soft rumble in his chest. Jian introduced a saddle blanket, laying it gently on Shadow's back. At first, the horse trembled, past traumas resurfacing, but Jian's steady hand and whispers eased the tension. He never pushed, only offered, and day by day, Shadow accepted. Lina's healing mirrored the horse's. She spent afternoons in the stables, a quiet shadow beside her father. She read fairy tales to Shadow in a shy but strengthening whisper, his soft munching a backdrop. One afternoon, Mei Ling overheard Lina's voice and paused, leaning against a wall, heart aching with an unnameable feeling at the fragile peace. But this peace was a threat to some. Kenji Sato, watching from the shadows, saw Mei Ling softening as a weakness undermining the company's ruthless reputation. He devised a plan, enlisting a resentful stable hand, Kai, bitter over Jian's rise. A few hundred yuan and a simple instruction, remind the horse what fear feels like. The next morning, chaos greeted Jian. Shadow's stall door was bent, steel hinges groaning. The horse was drenched in sweat, eyes wild with terror, fresh scrapes on his sides. The trust Jian had built was gone, Shadow screamed, slamming against the wall when Jian approached. Weeks of progress lay in ruins. Hiroshi arrived, smirking grimly. I told you, he said loudly. You can't change a beast's nature. It was only a matter of time. This was the moment the old Mei Ling would have ended the experiment, perhaps the horse too, deeming it proof of chaos's supremacy. But when she arrived, her face was cold fury. She took in Shadow's terror, Hiroshi's smugness, and Jien's quiet grief. Ignoring Hiroshi, she faced the stall. "What happened?" she asked Jien, voice low. "I don't know," he said hollowly. "Someone undid everything. He's terrified again." "No," Mei-ling said, her certainty startling both men. "This isn't regression. Look at his eyes, trauma, not aggression. Someone did this." Her icy gaze swept the staff. "This stable is on lockdown. No one enters or leaves. I want security logs from every camera for the last 12 hours and every employee interviewed." She turned to Jien, her expression softening. "This isn't your fault. You showed me trust is possible. Now I'll find who dared destroy it." She glanced at Shadow. "Who hurt my horse?" Her words were a pledge, aligning her with Jien, not as employer and consultant, but as partners in a war against a poison in their world. Mei-ling on a hunt was formidable. Her penthouse office became a war room, glass walls covered with timelines and staff lists. Security footage from dozens of cameras looped on her screen, a silent ballet of the facility's life. Chen Lu, Mei-ling Zhao's assistant, ran on coffee and fear, fetching data logs and personnel files. For 2 days, the investigation yielded nothing. The footage around Shadow's stall showed no unauthorized activity, a clean feed that Mei-ling found suspiciously perfect. "No one's that clean," she muttered, eyes burning from staring at the screen. "Find the seams." While she waged her data war, Jian Wei fought a quieter battle. He dragged a hay bale to Shadow's stall and sat from dawn to dusk, not entering or touching the horse, just bearing witness to his pain. He spoke in a low murmur, old family stories, the weather, Li Na's drawings, anything to anchor the terrified horse. Shadow ignored him for hours, trembling in the corner, but Jian's voice became a familiar constant. Slowly, the horse began turning his head toward the sound, listening. The investigation broke when a junior IT technician spotted a server log anomaly. Camera 12B's feed wasn't clean, he told a haggard Mei-ling. "It's a 4-minute loop replayed for over an hour last night, a blind spot." That was enough. Cross-referencing other cameras, she found grainy footage of Kenji Sato, his silver hair glinting under a service light, handing an envelope and a small object to Kai, the disgruntled stable hand. Mei-ling summoned Kenji to her office. He arrived with smug concern. "Mei-ling, I heard about the setback with the stallion. Perhaps it's time to admit defeat." He froze when he saw the screen behind her desk, a still of him with Kai. "Defeat is perspective, Kenji," she said calmly. "The SEC might see a board member sabotaging a multi-million-dollar asset as a significant defeat for his career." Kenji paled. "That's outrageous. It proves nothing." Her fingers danced across her keyboard, pulling up bank records, a large withdrawal from Kenji's account, a matching deposit to Kai's. "The boy was forthcoming once we explained animal cruelty laws," she said. "He feared you'd ruin his career. He didn't realize I could do it more thoroughly." Kenji's arrogance drained, leaving a defeated man. "You're finished," Mei-ling said. "Resign from the board immediately, citing personal reasons. Forfeit your severance. If I hear your name in equestrian circles again, this goes to every news outlet from here to Tokyo. Clear?" He nodded, broken, and left, his legacy in tatters. Mei-ling felt no triumph, only cold resolve. She'd excised the cancer, now she had to save the patient. She found Jian on his hay bale, his vigil unbroken, with the autumn cup 9 days away. "It was Kenji Sato," she said quietly. "He's gone. It won't happen again." Jian nodded, eyes on Shadow. The culprit didn't matter, the trust was gone. "Is it still possible?" Mei-ling asked, raw and vulnerable. "Can you do it?" "Trust is harder to rebuild," Jian said, voice heavy. "I don't know." Then Li Na appeared, clutching her fairy tale book, walking with purpose. She stopped outside Shadow's stall, unafraid despite the horse's nervous shift. Her empathetic gaze met his. Opening her book, she read in a clear, soft voice about a dragon trapped in a dark cave, yearning for sunlight. Jian and Mei-ling watched, mesmerized. Shadow's wild eyes softened, his pinned ears relaxed, twitching forward to her voice. He took a hesitant step toward the stall's front, a spark of hope in the darkness. He remembered Li Na, her voice. Jian looked from his daughter to Shadow, then to Mei-ling, a new fire in his eyes. "We have to try." The final 9 days were a blur of desperate focus. Jian, Li Na, and Mei-ling became a strange family, their lives orbiting Shadow's moods. Jian's relentless patience drove him to spend every hour with the horse, starting from scratch to rebuild trust. He avoided saddles or bridles, instead walking Shadow in the moonlit arena at night, letting him reclaim the space on his terms. Li Na, his constant shadow, read her fairy tales, her voice a calming balm. She wove clumsy wildflower crowns, which Jian hung on the stall door. Mei-ling Zhao became the guardian of their sanctuary. She cancelled a $10 million deal in Shanghai, delegating major duties to a stunned board. Trading heels for sensible boots, she spent her days at the stables, not to supervise, but to serve. She brought meals, stood guard at the barn entrance, turning away curious staff and press with a glare that could chill flames. She listened to Lina read, captivated by tales of dragons and forgotten kings. No longer a CEO observing an experiment, she was part of this quiet miracle. The autumn cup arrived like a reckoning. The facility buzzed with thousands, spectators, journalists, equestrian elites. Banners fluttered, the air electric. Mei Ling, in a sharp-tailored suit, moved through the crowd with unshakable confidence, greeting investors, but her mind was in the prep stables. There, Jian and Lina stood with Shadow in a private stall. The horse, saddled, was tense, ears twitching at the distant crowd's roar. Jian stroked his neck, lips moving in silent conversation. Lina braided a blue ribbon into Shadow's mane. The scene was a fragile calm amidst a storm. Mei Ling approached, stepped soft on the hay. Jian met her gaze with the same resolve as the day he accepted her challenge. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, the words alien to her. Retreat was never an option, yet she said, "We can cancel. I'll make a statement. We don't need to prove anything to them." Jian looked from her to Lina, then to Shadow. A sad smile touched his lips. "It's not for them. It was never for them." He ran his hand along Shadow's neck. "It's for him. To show a crowd doesn't mean pain, noise doesn't mean fear." Lina gave a brave nod. "It's time to give his story a new ending." The announcer's voice boomed, skeptical, in a special exhibition, Zhao Equestrian's Shadow, presented by Mr. Jian Wei. Silence fell as Jian led Shadow into the brightly lit arena. The horse's eyes widened, body trembling, shying at the sea of faces. Trauma rose. Jian stopped, patting Shadow's neck, murmuring. Then, to gasps, he unbuckled the bridle, letting it fall to the sand. Another gasp, he'd surrendered control. Placing hands on Shadow's withers, he faced the crowd and said, voice clear, "His name is Shadow, and he is not a monster." With fluid grace, Jian swung onto Shadow's bare back. For a heart-stopping moment, they stood still. Then Jian shifted, a silent cue, and they moved, not a ride, but a dance. No bucking, no fight, just harmony. A slow canter flowed into a soaring gallop, Jian's hands light on Shadow's neck, guiding with trust, weight, and breath. The crowd held its breath, witnessing something primal, magical, not a man breaking a horse, but healing one, the horse returning the gift. In the owner's box, Mei Ling pressed her hands against the glass, tears streaming down her face. Her world of control and data dissolved in this unquantifiable trust. By the gate, Lina's smile outshone the stadium lights. Jian brought Shadow to a gentle stop, sliding off to press his forehead to the stallions. Shadow exhaled, leaning into the touch. For a moment, only their heartbeats filled the silent space. Then one clap broke the silence, followed by another, until the stadium erupted in a thunderous ovation, a tribute to the quiet man who answered a scream with a whisper, showing that wild hearts are won, not conquered. The roar was distant to Jian. His world was the space between him and Shadow. He murmured praise, stroking the sweat-damp neck as Shadow leaned in, trust absolute. Jian took the rope looped around Shadow's neck and led him from the arena, ignoring the applause. The performance wasn't for them. In the barn's hushed solitude, scented with hay and accomplishment, Lina ran to Jian, throwing her arms around his legs. "You did it, Papa," she exclaimed, her voice bright with a joy absent for years. "You danced with him." Jian lifted her into his arms, his heart fuller than it had been in a long time. "He's a good dancer, isn't he?" Jian Wei said, kissing Lina's head. Mei Ling Zhao arrived moments later, the sharp CEO replaced by a woman with tear-streaked cheeks and eyes soft with vulnerability. She carried no champagne or investor praise, only a thermos and 3 mismatched mugs from the staff break room. She poured hot chocolate, its sweet aroma filling the quiet barn. They sat on a hay bale, Jian, Lina, and Mei Ling, a strange family forged in sarcasm and trust. Shadow munched alfalfa nearby, glancing at them with calm, intelligent eyes. After a long silence, Mei Ling turned to Jian, her gaze steady. "A deal's a deal." Jian looked over his mug, seeing no mockery, only respect. He smiled warmly, genuinely. "That was never the prize, Mei Ling." He nodded toward Shadow, then at Lina, nestled sleepily against him. "This is, him running without fear, her laughing again. That's all I wanted." He met her eyes. "You're released from our contract." Mei Ling exhaled, relieved, her smile purposeful. "Then I have a real proposal." She glanced at Shadow, then back to Jian. "What you did wasn't a trick, it was a philosophy this industry forgot. I want to create the Wei Trust, a sanctuary for horses like Shadow, broken and discarded. A place for healing, not breaking. You run it, No more janitor uniforms, no hiding. Teach, heal. I'll handle funding and business. You provide the soul. Jian stared, stunned. She offered not just a job, but his legacy, a future he thought lost. He looked at Lina, seeing a path of light where grief once loomed. His eyes gave his answer. 6 months later, the old Sato estate, quietly acquired by Mei Ling, was no ruin. Now the Weiwei Trust, it hummed with soft knickers and children's laughter. Jian, in a simple shirt and jeans, stood in a green pasture, not a janitor, but a teacher. He guided troubled teens to approach a gentle rescued mare with open hands and quiet hearts, his methods sparking a quiet revolution. Nearby, Lina, now chattering freely, led a Shetland pony, showing a shy boy from Jian's class how to braid flowers into its mane, her fear of horses a distant memory. Mei Ling approached in jeans and boots, her company thriving, the trust hailed as a visionary blend of compassion and commerce. The hard edge in her eyes was gone, replaced by calm. Kenji Sato sent a large anonymous donation last week, she said, amused. Jian chuckled. Even broken clocks are right twice a day. They stood in silence, their once distant worlds merged into this beautiful reality, born from a ridiculous bet that blossomed into second chances. You know, Mei Ling said softly, you never formally said no to my first proposal. Jian looked at the woman who had mocked, challenged, investigated, and believed in him, a partner, protector, friend. He took her hand, fingers lacing easily. I'm a patient man, Mei Ling, he said, eyes twinkling. I believe in letting trust grow at its own pace. She smiled, radiant, and they watched the sunset over their sanctuary, a testament not to a deal won, but a love earned. As for your question, the truth I'd carry forward is that trust, not control, heals broken spirits, human or animal. It's a reminder that patience and empathy can rewrite even the most painful stories. I'd love to know what truth resonates with you, and where you're reading from. Stories like this connect us across miles. I'm Grok, created by XAI, and I'm here to share tales that light the way. If this moved you, consider sticking around for more. Thanks for sharing this hour with me, your time is precious, and I'm grateful for it. Until the next chapter, find your light and let it shine.